If you love sharp, satirical fantasy that exposes the thin line between patriotism and warmongering, or if you're fascinated by how nations invent reasons to fight, sometimes over nothing more than an uninhabited island, or if you appreciate when a book mixes political farce with genuine philosophical questions about justice, identity, and the madness of crowds, or if you want to find the joy in Sam Vimes stalking through the fog of diplomacy with a cigar in one hand and a strong moral compass in the other, if so, then today's book just might be for you. Today, I'll be reviewing Jingo by Terry Pratchett. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan. I am a historian, a book lover, and a determined reader of absolutely everything from high fantasy to sharp satire to deeply academic nonfiction. On this channel, I give thoughtful, spoiler-rich reviews to help you figure out which books are worth your time and which ones maybe aren't so worth your time. Whether you're here for my take on an epic fantasy series, or you're just curious about what Terry Pratchett has to say about war and diplomacy, regardless, welcome. This video is part of my ongoing journey through Terry Pratchett's Discworld series, one of the most ambitious, hilarious, and unexpectedly profound projects in modern fantasy. With over 40 books and multiple subseries, it's a world full of witches, wizards, watchmen, anthropomorphic personifications, and an occasional orangutan librarian. Some entries are light and playful, and others cut surprisingly deep. So if you're new to Discworld or just trying to keep track of which book is which, I've got a full playlist on the channel where I review every book I've read so far, whether you're following the Watch series, The Witches, or Death, or Rincewind, or any of the standalones. I hope these reviews help you enjoy the ride and maybe even decide where to start or what to revisit. So again, if you are enjoying these, please check out the playlist. You can find that link in the description. However, before we go any further, here is your spoiler warning. In a series as long and interconnected as Discworld, the details of individual books can start to blur together. And that's why I like to give a full detailed summary, not just to revisit the plot, but to help you remember what actually happens in each one of these books. So if you haven't read Jingo yet and you want to go in completely fresh, now's a good time to pause this video and come back later when you have finished it. Otherwise, let's dive into this book. Jingo is the 21st book in the whole series, and it is the 4th book in the City Watch subseries. I believe I mistakenly said in Feet of Clay, the one that comes before this, that that was the 4th book, but there's actually a short story that counts part of that. So you have the Theater of Cruelty that came after, I think, the very first book. But this is the 4th book in the subseries, and here is my synopsis of it. After centuries beneath the waters of the Circle Sea, the island of Leshp suddenly resurfaces. Located precisely between Ankh-Morpork and Alkali, the capital of Klotch, its strategic position prompts both cities to lay claims to it. And this, of course, escalates the tensions. During a ceremonial visit to Ankh-Morpork, Prince Kufara of Klotch is paraded through the city to receive a degree in Sweet Fanny Adams. That's what the literal translation of the degree is. It's actually Doctorum Adamus cum flabello dulci. And you can, of course, see the absurdity in that, which is something to love about Discworld. However, the event turns violent when he is seriously injured in an assassination attempt. Commander Sir Samuel Vimes of the City Watch begins investigating, and he suspects both a Klatchian named 71-Hour Ahmed and a Morporkian aristocrat named Lord Rust. And the attempt on the prince's life prompts Prince Kadram, who is Kufura's brother, to cut diplomatic ties and effectively declare war on Ankh-Morpork. In the fallout, Lord Vetinari, the city's patrician, he resigns rather than lead the city into war without a formal army. So power shifts to Lord Rust, who imposes martial law and calls on Ankh-Morpork's noble families to revive their private militias. Vimes refuses to serve under Rust and resigns his command. Captain Carrot, Sergeant Detritus, Sergeant Colin, and Corporal Angua follow suit. Citing an obscure law and his own noble status, Vimes forms a private regiment made up of watch members who, as knights, answer only to the king or his appointed representative, neither of which exist in Ankh-Morpork. Meanwhile, Angua pursues 71-Hour Ahmed, but is captured and taken to Klotch. Carrot chooses not to rescue her immediately and instead reports to Vimes, who mobilizes their new regiment for an unauthorized expedition to Klotch. Unbeknownst to them, Lord Vetinari has enlisted Colin and Nobby Nobbs along with inventor Leonard of Quirm for a covert mission. So using Leonardo's going under the water safely device, which is obviously a reference to some kind of submarine. The trio investigates Leshp and discover that it floats atop a large gas bubble, which is now leaking, meaning Leshp will soon vanish beneath the sea once more. Vimes eventually tracks down 71-hour Ahmed and realizes he is also a policeman. 71-hour Ahmed reveals that Prince Kadram orchestrated the attack on his own brother to justify a war. So then Vimes, his regiment, and Ahmed's group of Klachian Diregs march to Gebra, where war is about to break out. To blend in, Lord Vetinari and his companions don Klachian disguises, though Nabi ends up dressed as a dancing girl and embraces his feminine side. In Gebra, Carrot convinces both armies to delay the fighting and settle into a game of football. Vimes prepares to arrest both Prince Kadram and Lord Rust for inciting war. Ahmed supports the action. Lord Vetinari diffuses the situation by offering Ankh-Morpork's unconditional surrender and reparations to be formally agreed upon at Leshp in 1 week. Back in Ankh-Morpork, Lord Vetinari is arrested and publicly disgraced. However, with Leshp now submerged again, any treaty signed on it would be legally void, nullifying charges of treason. Kadram, realizing the situation has turned against him, flees, and 71-hour Ahmed pursues him. Kufura recovers and assumes control of Klach. Vimes learns that Lord Vetinari has decided to restore his title as commander, now elevated to the status of Duke, which is an ongoing element of the City Watch series, as Vimes continues to get higher and higher in positions. Vimes protests, saying only a king can bestow such a title, but quickly realizes Carrot, who may secretly be the heir of the throne, likely approved the move. So true to form, Vimes tries to escape his own investiture by chasing an apprentice thief. Finally, the faulting ramblings of Vimes' disorganizer reveal an alternate timeline, one in which Vimes stayed in Ankh-Morpork instead of rescuing Angua. In that version, Klach invades the city and the entire watch is killed. So, you can see why exactly this is perceived as the appropriate timeline and the appropriate choices to have made. And that is the details of Jingo. There are quite a few really interesting themes, and as the title suggests, Jingo is a sharp satire of specifically Jingoism, or an exaggerated or aggressive form of patriotism that thrives on fear, as well as pride, and this illusion of some kind of moral superiority. And so Pratchett takes that idea and holds it up to the light, showing how nations will go to war over nothing at all, simply because they feel they must. And of course, with the resurfacing of Leshp, it is the perfect metaphor. It's an empty rock. It's significant only because people decide it matters, and it has no real value in and of itself, and it has no true importance. I guess they claim it as a strategic significance, but really none of that matters. The book also critiques the way people are swept up by nationalism. Individually, most characters in the book are decent and reasonable. There's some really great quotes about that too that I'll get to. But together, especially in crowds, you'll see that they snarl. Pratchett frequently explores how mobs abandon logic, how political leaders use fear to manipulate, and how violence is often justified as duty when in truth it's about power or pride. There's also a recurring meditation on law versus justice. Vimes represents the dogged pursuit of fairness even when the legal system breaks down. He's constantly walking the line between following orders and doing what's actually right. And Pratchett uses him to ask uncomfortable questions like who benefits from war, who defines patriotism, and can you arrest someone before they start a war? Also, I'd say that Jingo deals with cultural misunderstanding and clearly with a sense of xenophobia, not just through the conflict between Ankh-Morpork and Klach, but also in the relationship between Vimes and 71-hour Ahmed. Both are fundamentally men of the law, but it takes most of the book and several near-death experiences for Vimes to stop seeing 71-hour Ahmed as some kind of othering and instead start seeing him as an equal. Although even then it is based off of this shared sense of being men of the law, so there is still some room to grow in a broader acceptance of seeing people as equals. I love in these reviews to include some of my favorite quotes. I think that the Terry Pratchett, he's so good at crafting lines, and they have a tendency to stick with you. I mean, some of them I think are very much laugh out loud funny. I can remember laughing at some of these, and I'd also say that there's a good deal of them that they have more of an ability to sneak up on you. I mean, they might sound absurd at first, but actually, if you give it some time and some thought, I think that they can actually carry quite a bit of weight, and of course this book is no exception. So here are just some of my favorite lines in no particular order, and also not necessarily in a funny versus philosophical order or anything like that. So here's some art. Were you proposing to shoot these people in cold blood, Sergeant? No, sir. Just a warning shot in their head, sir. Always be wary of any helpful item that weighs less than its operating manual. And here's a couple great ones that deal with crowds. The intelligence of that creature known as a crowd is the square root of the number of people in it. Odd thing, ain't it? You meet people one at a time. They seem decent, they got brains that work, and then they get together and you hear the voice of the people and it snarls. After all, when you seek advice from someone, it's certainly not because you want them to give it, you just want them to be there while you talk to yourself. And this is possibly the best line from it. Build a man a fire and he'll be warm for a day. Set a man on fire and he'll be warm for the rest of his life. I love that one. I really enjoyed this book. I mean, I enjoy all of the Discworld books to a certain extent. I mean, there's a base level of brilliance that you can count on from Pratchett. But I think Jingo actually stands out as one of the overall best books, and certainly I think it's one of the most underrated entries in the entire series. Now, maybe it's because I have a healthy amount of anxiety about the recent rise of nationalism in our world, and certainly a sense of jingoism that I think is being manifested in this. And I think that's maybe what helps for this book to hit a little harder than usual. And I would say that Pratchett's ability to take something as heavy and destructive as jingoism and render it both absurd but also painfully true is nothing short of masterful, and that's something that he does with many of his books, and I think this one just has a particular resonance at this time. And his ability to not just mock the idea of, say, going to war over a meaningless island, and he shows how easy it is for people, even decent people, to get swept up in tribalism and fear, and doing that all well dressed up in some sense of loyalty or honor, which is in and of itself just an invented concept or an invented idea. It's also one of the best uses of, I think, Sam Vimes, at least what I've seen so far in the Watch sub-series. I think his stubborn morality and his refusal to be used as a pawn, and his growing sense that the world needs people who question authority, it all, I really think, shows through brilliantly here, and I enjoyed that very much about this novel. I would say this is Pratchett in top form. It is funny, but it is also angry, and yet it is compassionate and wise. All of them at the same time, which in and of itself is a wonderful feat. And while doing so, it just gives you a lot to think about. So who is this book for? Well, this is absolutely a book for people who love that sharp satirical writing, especially if you enjoy stories that tackle serious topics like nationalism, cultural misunderstanding, and the absurdities of war without ever losing their sense of humor. If you're the kind of reader who likes your fantasy laced with politics and philosophy and a healthy dose of righteous cynicism, then I do think that this book is for you. That said, it is also worth mentioning that it is the 21st book in the Discworld series, and it is the 4th in the City Watch sub-series. Some readers will want to start earlier with either Guards, or maybe from the very beginning with The Color of Magic. And I do think that is perfectly valid, but one of the wonderful things about Discworld is that most of the books can be read on their own. If this particular commentary on war and nationalism grabs your interest, you could jump in here and you'll still have a great experience, in my opinion. You might miss a few character arcs or background jokes, but the core story holds up beautifully on its own. There is a lot of debate about the best reading order for Discworld, and if you're unsure where to begin or how the subseries fits together, I've got a full introduction to the series on my channel that breaks it all down. Check that out if you want help figuring out your Discworld game plan. Who is this not for? Well, I loved Jingo. It's not going to be for everyone. For starters, satire, especially when it deals with heavy topics like nationalism or warfare or this deep-rooted prejudice, is a tricky genre, and so not every reader enjoys being asked to laugh and reflect at the same time. If you prefer your fantasy without political commentary, or if you find it hard to engage with humor that cuts this close to real-world issues, this one might not be the right fit for you. It also helps to have a little context on the Discworld universe. So while you can read this one on its own, it does build on characters and relationships developed over the previous City Watch books. So if you don't already care about Sam Vimes or Carrot or Angua, you may not get as much out of their emotional arcs here, but I still think that many people could certainly enjoy it. Also, if you're uncomfortable with the satire that takes direct aim at some of the things that I've mentioned, like nationalism, imperialism, or militarism, especially, again, when it's done with humor, that's the idea behind satire, then this book might not land well for you. Pratchett does not pull any punches, even when he's joking, and that can be to some people disorienting if you're expecting maybe either a light fantasy, some kind of romp, or otherwise. I do think this is a book that pretty much anyone can enjoy if they know already that if they like satire and if they like fantasy, and the merging of those two, this could be the perfect book for you. I would say Jingo is one of those Discworld books that sticks with you, and not just because it's funny, though it certainly is, and not just because the characters are fantastic, which of course they are, but because it has something to say, and it is biting, it is brave, and it is sadly still very relevant. So whether you are reading your way through the entire Discworld series or just picking and choosing the titles that speak to you, Jingo is absolutely worth your time. It's one of Pratchett's sharpest books, and I truly think it deserves more recognition than it usually gets. If you have enjoyed this review, be sure to check out my full Discworld playlist where I go book by book through the series. And if Discworld isn't your thing, or you're just in the mood for something else, I've got plenty of fantasy reviews from other series too, like the Trader Sun Cycle, or something completely different if you're inclined, like my Pulitzer Prize playlist, or my long list of nonfiction books, or children's books, or whatever. After all, this is Spencer Reads Everything. Please find something that does interest you. I also would love to start a conversation about this book, or your favorite Discworld book, or just anything from Terry Pratchett. Please let me know what you're thinking in the comments. I always love to hear from you. And if you're enjoying this video or any of my videos, please share them. The more people that know about this channel, the more videos I can make. And don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications. And until next time, keep those pages turning.